Part 4. Mastering Your Senses. Chapter 15. Senses Can Lie. So far in this study we have learnt how to appreciate things by absorption and assimilation and contemplation, and how to observe our local environment and to restrain our judgments about that local environment, because the world doesn't always fall in line with our ideals and how it appears in our version of the world. So if we can appreciate that, we may see that we need to interfere less in the lives of other people, and to judge other people, to gossip about those people, and to talk about them behind their backs. And even when we speak to them in front of their faces, we can now appreciate how we say makes a big difference, what we say makes a big difference, and if we say things at all, or if we choose to not say things at all, then that makes a big difference, and it's up to us. We have the power to decide. A quietened mind, free from judgments, and free from right and wrong, and free from interference in other people's lives, is certainly the stage that we want to hope to get to, because Part 4 is all about the senses and how the senses lie, because that is yet another reason why we should be careful when observing what we say and how we say it, because sometimes we might base our opinions on our senses, and our senses can be wrong. So let's take all the senses individually. Have you ever happened to see something that looked like it was a certain situation, but on closer inspection it turned out not to be the case? Have you ever seen somebody that you thought you knew, and on closer inspection it turns out not to be the someone that you knew at all? And if you'd introduced yourself and said, "Hi, it's me," the other person would have looked at you crazily and said, "Who the heck is this?" Our vision can lie. And when we put 2 and 2 together using this vision, we may not always get 4 as a result. In the audible capacity, have you ever heard somebody speaking in a conversation and you gained part of that conversation and thought they were talking about one thing when they were actually talking about another, maybe even completely unrelated and separate to that? Maybe you overheard somebody speaking and you thought they were speaking about you, whereas on closer inspection you figured out and you realised that they weren't actually speaking about you, they were speaking about somebody else and something else entirely. Have you ever heard an alarm raised across town and thought that someone must have broke into a certain building or damaged a certain building to trigger that alarm, when in fact it was just the wind rattling against the window which triggered the alarm and no such break-in occurred? Have you ever heard a strange sound from your TV and interpreted that sound as something coming from outside by mistake? So, misinterpreting sounds or listening to parts of things happening is certainly a way where the senses can lie, and they can lead you to draw conclusions which aren't actually the truth. Have you ever tasted something which tastes like something else? And if you had a blindfold on, you might swear that that thing was the something else. And certainly experiments have shown that tasting with blindfolds on, using foods which taste like other foods, is a very easy way to fool the senses. And have you ever picked up a scent of something which isn't actually happening? For example, have you ever been sat in a room all alone and smelt something burning and thought that the something burning must have been from your kitchen, and on closer inspection it happened to be a smell of something burning which was burning outside, and it happened to just be drifting in through the window, and the house wasn't burning down after all? It's important to realise that even our most trusted senses are in fact fallible, and we can't always rely on these senses or our brains to calculate the right interpretation of those things. And imagine if we are colourblind, we might not always get the right answer to our questions. If we are partially sighted or if we are partially deaf, we may not get the right answers to our interpretations. So it is often important to double check our facts and to corroborate what we have seen with someone else, before making up those conclusions for ourselves. And certainly the older we get and our senses begin to fade, it becomes all the more important to double check before we open our mouths and come to the wrong conclusion. Chapter 16. At War with the Mind. By far the biggest sense which can lead to misinterpretation is the mind, and the mind will judge on its own, consciously or subconsciously or even unconsciously. The trick is to observe the mind and to realise that not everything in the mind, based on those fallible senses, is the truth. For example, imagine you are with a partner and you are gaining from that partner what is known as bad vibes. You might have seen and heard and smelt and touched everything coming from your partner and interpreted that as your partner having a problem with you for some reason, or your partner may not like you for some reason, because all the smells and tastes and touches and sights of that situation led to you gaining that conclusion. Whereas on further inspection, if you ask the person directly, they might reveal that they are actually in a mood for some other unknown reason, entirely nothing to do with you, and they are just basically working off their emotions from the day, and they actually do love you after all, and actually those thoughts and those feelings and those senses actually lied, and you came to the wrong conclusions, and actually everything is okay. It's so easy to misinterpret the feelings and the emotions of others as something to do directly with us, and we may interpret those things as our fault, but sometimes other people mask their own true feelings, and something that they are really bothered about may not be anything to do with you. They are in a mental mood, a mental state for whatever reason, and they are feeling that right now and in the moment, so often it's better for them to express that, and if you misinterpret that as being your fault, then perhaps you have misread the situation. Sometimes, of course, the opposite is true, and if we are in ego and the situation really is our fault and our problem and someone else is reacting to that, then if we are not aware of that situation and we make it up that they have the problem and it was not our fault and it was not our responsibility, then again our senses have lied, and in that situation, instead of apologizing, we went into ego, and you are in the wrong and you have misinterpreted. So the mind can come to extraneous, erroneous conclusions based on a number of factors, and if you are a person which self-perpetuates your own ego or your own paranoid persecution, your own self-torment, then the mind can habitually get into the habit of coming up with erroneous conclusions and to give you stories which aren't true. And if you go around telling those stories to other people based on that untruth, then that leads to difficult situations. Not trusting the senses to deliver the correct information 100% of the time is certainly a step of appreciation as a philosopher, because you can't always rely on what other people tell you, what you find in books, on the magazines, in the internet, in newspapers, and on TV. All these things regularly lie and exaggerate and look at things from one perspective or another, and they can be biased in one perspective or another. So all these sources can expand the mind and fill the mind with all kinds of trivia, and it's our job to line those up on the table and to make sense of all this if we need to make sense of any of this, and to put the things to one side which don't make sense and to work upon the things which seem to make sense, but at the same time realizing that all these things could be just a figment of our imagination. To make matters worse, sometimes your mind can even fail to remember things accurately. Sometimes we might remember things in the past, and we have gone through those things in the past so often in our mind that we are unsure of what is the truth, what is the exaggeration, what is the lie, and what is the dream which never happened in the first place. Sometimes when a comedian will begin a story, he or she might say, "I've told this story so many times that I don't know whether this happened or whether this was just a story. I can't tell the truth from the lie any longer." And comedians make a living from exaggeration and from weaving stories, and sometimes if a story is worth telling, it is worth weaving a little exaggeration into, and a few aspects which didn't actually exist, but the writer wanted them to exist, and they could have existed in the writer's mind. So sometimes when you are hearing a story, you might only be gaining half the truth, because mind fades and memory fades over time. And certainly when you are young and youthful, you might remember many things many times more clearly than you will do in your 50s and 60s, when the mind and the memory is fading away, and sometimes you can't even remember why you walked into a certain room, even though you had the intention of going into the room and collecting a certain object only moments before. So sometimes memory fade doesn't help, and sometimes, as I say, we can add things into our memory that didn't actually happen, particularly those things that happened many years ago which we can't accurately remember any longer. We might add stories onto those and to make our nightmares come true, and sometimes we can relive those nightmares and to talk about those nightmares to other people as if they were true, but in truth what actually happened was we created a story around that ancient incident, and the actual situation, no matter how big or how small it was, takes second place to the drama of the story in lieu of what actually happened, simply because our memory can't remember what actually happened. If we add on top of that our personal interpretations, then the whole situation can get vastly out of hand. For example, imagine you and your partner are having an argument, and she recalls that 5 years ago you happened to say something and you did something because of a certain reason, and in your mind and your memory you happen to do those things for a completely different reason. Then they are effectively harbouring those grudges over an incident which actually never happened in the way they thought it happened, and they are holding on to their story of the way they thought it happened, but who are still perpetuating that story many years later. Sometimes when we are arguing with our partner, the partner conveniently exaggerates or forgets what actually happened in the heat of the moment, and those exaggerations could be completely opposite to how the person actually feels, and completely opposite to what actually happened in the other person's eyes. So in the heat of an argument, sometimes stories can be made up on the spot, and even the talker may not even believe those stories, but if the listener believes those stories, then that can lead to hurt feelings and harsh words. Yet at the heart of every story there is often a grain of truth, so it is up to the philosopher to uncover that grain of truth and to appreciate that fact over what you interpret someone else to have thought and what you interpret somebody else to have felt, because once again we cannot walk a mile in another person's shoes, so we cannot always rely on our interpretation of the situation and how we think other people are and how they should be, because life simply doesn't work like that. The mind is fallible. So, to a certain extent, you can't even trust your mind and your memory to give you enough facts to deal with every situation and the correct facts, and to recall the correct facts in every given situation. Sometimes the things we assume in a given situation is actually incorrect, and we are basing our facts on an assumption which isn't in fact real. If the senses cannot be trusted, then it's important to double check those facts. But not all of the senses cannot be trusted. Certainly the sixth sense, that gut reaction in the pit of your stomach when something isn't going quite right, or you predict something won't turn out the way you hoped it would be, and the word from your pit of the stomach is certainly no, and it doesn't feel right, so let's not go for that. The sixth sense, or intuition as some people might say, is a way to feel the inner core of your being, which is trying to tell you things every day. And if you ignore those inner core feelings and those primal movements in your being, then you are ignoring the ebb and the flow of life. Using the sixth sense to observe your world is a way to discern who to trust and who not to trust, who to speak to and who you cannot speak to, and how best to deal with any given situation. If it feels wrong, then it probably is. Can you really trust yourself to always make the right decision? Can you really trust yourself to always go the right way? No, you cannot trust yourself to make mistakes. Everybody does. Chapter 17. The Ever-Changing Self. Who really knows you? Maybe people in your life have told you that they really know you and that they can interpret you and prejudge what you are about to do in any given situation, but who really knows you? I put it to you that nobody really knows you, and nobody really knows what's going on inside, and nobody can really predict how you will be. In fact, to a certain extent, even you can't predict who you will be from day to day if you are at the whim of moods and the ebb and flow of life. Everyone is born a blank sheet of paper, and as you rise out of bed of a morning, you will be a blank sheet of paper. Every single day will be brand new, and as we have seen and as we shall go on to see again, everything is happening for the very first time and the very last time on that particular day, so you will be a completely different person for the very first time and the very last time on that particular day. It's also important to realise that we can never judge how other people will interpret us day by day, and other people may judge us correctly, and sometimes other people may judge us and get things completely wrong, because they don't know who we are on the inside. Only we know that, day by day, hour by hour. Some of the things that we've talked about, particularly when it comes to our own self-image and the image that we project onto other people, cannot be directly interpreted by us, because we never know how other people will react, and we can never tell how we appear in the eyes of other people, because we appear differently to every single person. Everybody is different to everybody else, of course, but also that same person could be entirely different in any given situation. For example, the person may be an entirely different person when speaking to their father and their mother than how they are speaking to their boss or their partner. They are an entirely different person when speaking to their children as they are speaking to their brother or their best friend. And of course, people are entirely different when they go out for an evening. If you've only met an acquaintance through going out of an evening, you may think they are very vibrant and open and honest and genuine, flamboyant, carefree, happy. But if you'd met that same person in another situation, maybe during their home life or their work life, then you might find an entirely different person with an entirely different personality to be observed. They may have one type of character when they are free and single human beings, but if they become a mother or a father, their personality may change. So everyone is different in different situations, and the same person can be different even in the same situations given variables involved. You might find the same person is different in the company of one friend to another friend, so sometimes you'll find them open and happy and smiling in your company, and yet reserved and quite shy in the company of other people. In the mornings, certain people may have different ways about them than in the evenings, and as we have seen at work, there will be different people to how they appear at home. A person who likes surprises may not always be relied upon to be surprised if you then surprise them, and a person who likes practical jokes may not always appreciate those jokes when those are practically sprung on them. And you might think, well, I thought I knew this person. Well, obviously you don't. You can't even rely on a person to be exactly the same in exactly the same situation every single day, because they won't be. Something will be different about them, and something about you will be different as well, no matter how small that difference may be. In fact, I put it to you that everybody is different every day in every situation, and you cannot rely on yourself or other people to mirror what you had yesterday or to mirror what you expect for the day after. Chapter 18. Hiding behind masks. We cannot rely on other people to not only agree with us, but we cannot rely on other people to be the same every day. We cannot rely on other people to appreciate our views and to appreciate us being a part of their world or being a part of their business. You can't even expect other people's personalities to reflect who they are, because some people like to hide behind masks and they like to hide behind personas which they have created for themselves in their own world, and the world is then a reflection of that. So, for example, if someone wants to come across as very confident, then they might put on a confident front in front of their friends and their family and their home life, and everybody who sees those traits in that person would say, yes, there is a very confident and happy person living in that body, and that's all we need to know. But on the inside, the person might be in fear, and they might be unconfident, and it might simply be the fact that you don't know the person well enough to reveal that side of them, the real side of them, the actual side of them, and all the confidence masks are a fake persona, and they are basically lying about who they really are. So you can't expect people to be genuine, particularly not all the time. You can't expect people not to exaggerate their lives and to tell you fake stories and tell lies, because that's up to them. And everybody lives in their own world, and in their world it might be perfectly fine to exaggerate and lie their life away. And to other people, doing such a thing would be unheard of, and they could never lie, and they could never exaggerate. It all depends on self-security. To some people, self-security means exaggeration. It means bigging themselves up. It means an ego trip. To other people, self-security means always telling the truth and being in high integrity, which means always being honest and always trying your best. And if something fails, admit it, and if something goes well, admit it, and to just be true to yourself. And so being true to yourself is certainly the path of a philosopher, because if they can't be honest with themselves, then they can't be honest with anybody. And so the path of philosopher starts by being true to yourself, and if you are, then to a certain extent nothing can hurt you, because you've already dealt with the pain and all those aspects which you may not ordinarily be comfortable with. Then what is left is a clean slate. It is yet another blank sheet of paper. If you are putting on a mask genuinely, and you know you are putting on a mask, for example, if you are at work and one of your work colleagues insists that you smile and greet the customers happy and cheerful, then that may all be part and parcel of working in that role, and you will have to put on a fake smile and some sort of cheeriness to get you through the day. If, however, you're hiding behind a mask and you don't realise that you are hiding behind a mask, then that can really put a serious dampener on your day, because other people will see you under a certain light and interpret your actions under a certain light, and if you are not like that, then it can get back to you and you may be upset by that. If you regularly put on a mask of self-confidence, then that might lead to arrogance and being overstated and over-opinionated, and nobody likes a person who appears arrogant and overstating and over-opinionating. Even if you put on a mask of being a deep person and a meek person and someone who is very sensible and very honest, and yet inside you are a raging torrent, then again you are not being truthful to yourself. You are putting over a version of yourself which isn't congruent to who you are on the inside, and congruence just means mirroring on the outside what you feel on the inside. The trick is to notice when you are being a saint, when you are acting like a martyr, when you are being arrogant and overstated and over-opinionated in ego mode, and when you are just being yourself. The trick is to catch yourself whenever you feel you are not being true to yourself, and to stop yourself from exaggerating those parts which are not true to yourself, even if exaggerating those parts is a part of you which is sensible and serious about things. By exaggerating those aspects, sometimes you become over-serious and too sombre and too sensible about the whole situation, so sometimes it's not the right way to go. Some people have got so ingrained in their masks that they believe that that's who they are, even if they're not that way at all. A person who deliberately goes out and finds faults with the world may hide behind a poor me mask, and they will be poor me wherever they go, and as soon as the onlooker hears another poor me, then they know the other person is hiding behind that mask, and they will generally close their eyes and ears to it. If your mask is I'm not good enough and I'll never be good enough, then again, once that appears in another person's eyes, you may be caught out, and it's yet another poor me trap that you'll never be good enough. And in reality, if you believe you'll never be good enough, then guess what will happen? If you believe you should have been a contender and your role in life isn't being fulfilled, and you should be up there and boisterous, fanatical and driven, then you are hiding behind the look at me mask. And sometimes the look at me mask is one way to affect friends and to influence people, but sometimes it is a way to lose friends and to alienate people. If your mask is I will always be poor, or if your mask is I am unlovable and I will never find a partner and I will never find my place in life and my dreams cannot come true and I am a nobody, I am a nothing in life, then those again are masks which hold people back. And all of those things, as we shall see in further chapters, are not true. They are only true if you make them true and if you believe them to be true. As we shall see, mind creates matter, and if you create those matters out of your mind, then you create something illusory. Those things didn't exist before, and they don't really exist in reality, but you are bringing those things into actuality simply from your own free will, and because to a certain extent part of your mind really wants to do that and really wants to behave that way. But if mind does in fact create matter, then what you get on the other end of all that is your world will mirror the inside point of view of you. So unless you change you on the inside, you can't expect the world to change on the outside. And more often than not, a person who is poor me will find themselves in ever more difficult situations, and I am always ill will find themselves always ill, and I'm not good enough will never be good enough. Even if you are hiding behind a mask of I'm too old, certainly there are things in life which you may in fact be too old for at that present time, but there are also different things in life which you are certainly not too old for at that present time. And so if you say you are too old to take yourself around the world and take a cruise around the Mediterranean, if you say you are too old to meet a partner and too old to look after children, then lo and behold, that's what life will throw at you to confirm your worldview. Because yet again, whatever you expect from life is usually confirmed, because you'll go out and look for it, and as soon as you find the things which confirm your view of life, you can point and say, yes, I knew that life was like that all along, I'm right. And I'm right is the final mask which I will talk about in this chapter. The I'm right mask is the curse of all egomaniacs all over the world, and being right in any given situation is certainly a way to stop a conversation in its tracks, to go up against somebody else with different views, even if the other person has open views and is perfectly open to learning from you and learning from your points of view. The very fact that you are trying to be right about the whole situation means that they feel discredited and alienated, and they feel like you are just being right out of a state of arrogance. And in fact, usually the people who are trying to be right are doing it out of a state of inner insecurity, and in fact if they were secure on the inside, they wouldn't have any reason to be arrogant, and they wouldn't have any reason to be right. Chapter 19. Beginning to take care. Our thoughts and feelings about the present may be real, but they may be based on illusions of the past or the future which are not real. They may be based on the senses or the information or the memories we have been given, which have been faded or distorted over time, and we may be basing our reality on an unreality. Our stories that we make up inside our heads are not real. They are stories. He said this, she said that happened. Those things are all real. That didn't happen, I wanted this to happen, but it didn't work. Those things are not real. Because, well, if something didn't work, then it didn't happen. So if it didn't happen, then it is not real. Those stories are made up of our views, based on our point of view at the time, and our point of view since. And if we dwell on that one side of the story, then we have cares and we have worries. Our thoughts and feelings may even appear real, but our thoughts and feelings are actually transitory, which means they can fade and change in minutes and hours and days. We may feel one thing about a given situation in the morning, but by the time the evening comes around, our feelings have changed about that given situation. And so what was real in the morning is now not real in the evening. There may have been a real possibility of something happening the day before, but having slept on it and awoken the next day, the situation may be that hasn't arisen, and we worried over nothing. It's so easy to just get one end of the stick, when you really needed both ends to understand the entire situation. As we cannot interpret the feelings and the thoughts of other people, it is once again so easy to fret over nothing. And we may be simply materializing our own ball and chain, our own baseball bat, and simply hitting ourselves over the head with it. And it can be easy to do that if you aren't on the ball and you spot yourself beating your head against a brick wall and beating yourself up, and you put a stop to that right away. Because what good would that do? Beating yourself up never did any good at any stage of your life, so let's give up trying to do that now. Beating yourself up is not taking care of yourself. It is completely the opposite to taking care of yourself. And basically, because you are on your own, in your own skin, there is only you who can take care of yourself. The trick as a philosopher is to understand which things to take care of in which priority order. And some things are certainly worth taking care of to the highest order, and some things are not worth taking care of or bearing in mind. For example, to which degree does it matter whether the dishes are done and the floor is swept, as long as the roof over your head is not leaking and it's in one piece? And what does it matter acquiring a new car or a bigger car or a new refrigerator if the refrigerator you have at the moment is perfectly fine and working? What does it matter if your friend goes out drinking of an evening and comes back and doesn't tell you what they've been up to? As long as they're okay, and obviously they are okay because they've returned home, then that's fine. You can let them alone to live their life. Because hopefully they will be taking care of their life, just as hopefully you are taking care of yours. Knowing what to think about and knowing when to worry is an important aspect of being a philosopher, and worrying is yet another natural part of life. But for the philosopher, the important thing is choosing what to think about and what to assimilate, and to discard the things which aren't worth worrying about. There is a proverb and a saying, in order to be carefree, first you have to be free of cares. And that doesn't mean to say you must be careless and ignorant and not care about situations and other people's feelings. It just means that the level of care you take over a situation dictates the outcome. So if you take care, then that situation will more than likely come out carefully processed and somewhere near appropriate. But if you don't take care of the situation, and if you simply deal with the situation as quickly as possible to get to some kind of an outcome, then that is the fool's path, and that is a slippery road, because if you don't take care of a situation, that can lead to mistakes, and mistakes lead on to long delays. As Tolkien said, shortcuts lead to long delays, and certainly taking shortcuts in life, rushing to get places, leads to mistakes and errors in judgment. And once again, it depends on how you approach life, because if you are treating life with respect, with care, with kid gloves, then usually life will respect you back, and treats you with a bit more care and a bit more respect. If not, if you don't treat life with respect and other people with respect, then how do you naturally assume that life and other people will treat you with respect? Of course, it doesn't happen. If you disrespect something simply by rushing and trying to force situations and moving through life way too quickly to get to some kind of destination, then things will break down, and if you don't respect anything, then life has a way of turning around and not respecting you back. As we shall see, life is not about the destination. In fact, when we reach the destination in life, that is when it's all over. So we really do not want to reach the ultimate destination in life, and at the end of each day it is all over. So we only have one day to make it count, and it is that day that matters. It is about taking care of the day and taking care of what really counts, which helps you take care of that day easily and smoothly and without incurring any harm on other people. Part of taking care of yourself is the following motto: I mean you no harm. Repeat that to yourself as often as you need to encourage yourself and to reassure yourself that you really do mean yourself no harm in this life, and that if you can take steps to prevent harming yourself and harming other people, because don't forget, if you start shouting and going crazy at someone else, they may turn around and harm you in return. So if you harm others, then you are open for that attack. So if you mean no harm to yourself and others, and you are humble about your opinions and don't stick to them steadfastly, then you might be able to get away with living life easily and smoothly, which, as you can appreciate, is a very nice place to be.